On day one, before we'd even made camp, we found something off trail that told us we were not as alone as we thought. 3 true hiking horror stories. Story 1. 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I had been planning for 5 years to turn 30, sell everything we owned, and just travel. We sold my car, kept his Trailblazer, and started moving around the States and Canada. My brother likes to joke that we're anti-establishment hippies. We tend to chase good weather, find a state park, and backcountry hike into the wilderness for days at a time. Between the two of us, we have one prepaid phone for emergencies and checking in with family, and one MacBook I use for work. I'm a freelance writer on retainer with a robotics company, mostly writing white papers and web content. The whole point is to live debt-free with as few bills as possible. Last summer, we decided to do some backcountry hiking in Arkansas. It's one of those states you don't really hear other hikers talking about, but we'd read it had beautiful natural landscape, and it does. The rules at this particular park were pretty lax. No permit needed, no check-in required. We had all our gear and planned a 6-day hike, 3 days in and 3 days out. The whole time we were out there, we didn't see or hear another soul. But on day 1, as we were moving off trail to find a camping spot near dusk, we took what looked like an animal trail about half a mile out and came across a green 2-person tent. It was almost camouflaged in the foliage, so we came up on it nearly by accident. Some backpackers prefer privacy, others are more social. We're the social type. We've had great experiences camping near other backpackers, sharing stories and food. We were around 30 yards from the tent, which was zipped closed, so my boyfriend shouted a greeting to make our presence known. No movement, no sound. We figured whoever it was either wasn't around or didn't want company, so we headed off in a different direction, set up camp, and never heard a thing. We moved on the next morning and completely forgot about the green tent until near the end of day 5 on our way back. We were looking for another spot off trail when we came up on the same green tent. That's not completely unheard of, but backcountry hikers usually keep moving, so we really weren't expecting it. The tent flap was open this time. My boyfriend called out his greeting again and got nothing back. He wanted to go check it out, saying it was weird and that maybe someone was hurt. I didn't like the idea from the start. We'd heard enough stories from other backpackers about hermits and mountain men who want privacy and carry guns. But my boyfriend assured me we'd be fine and said if things got tense, we could just offer the guy some weed and move on. As soon as we got within 20 yards of the tent, the smell of decomposition hit us hard. My boyfriend had been calling out his greeting as we walked up, and when the smell reached him, he stopped and turned to me and said, "What if we find a dead body?" My skin crawled. I had never seen a dead body and did not want to. The closer we got, the worse the smell became. I was pretty sure we were going to walk up and find some old camper's rotting corpse inside. What we found was worse than that. Outside the tent were a dead doe's legs, all 4 of them covered in flies. They looked like they had been cut most of the way through and then ripped off the rest of the way. It was a mess. Inside was the body and head of the deer, but the middle portion was wrapped in a blue fleece blanket that was soaked in blood at the bottom where the legs had been. It was lying on its side with the back end facing the tent opening. The tail had been cut off. The anus and vaginal area were covered in dried blood and were open, like something had been penetrating it. The mouth was the same way. The lower portion of the body was bent at a broken-looking angle. The tent was open so we could see all of this without going inside. Not that we would have, because by that point the smell was almost debilitating. There was a nearly empty bottle of Jergens baby oil and a stained green and white fringed kitchen towel. That was it. I immediately started crying and begged him to leave. All my boyfriend could get out was, "What the fuck?" And then we turned and ran. We ran back to the trail and jogged down it for as long as we could, until dark forced us to stop and set up camp. We didn't go far off trail at all. Neither of us slept. We didn't light a fire or use headlamps after full dark. We just sat there whispering to each other, going over and over what we had seen. Every small noise made us flinch. I kept thinking that whoever did that would come back to his tent, find our footprints, and track us down. I don't think I have ever been that scared in my life. Just before dawn, we packed up and got moving. My boyfriend stopped at the ranger station on the way out of the park to report what we had seen. The ranger was a young guy around our age, and he looked just as disturbed listening to the story as we were telling it. He wrote most of it down, and my boyfriend pointed out the approximate location on a map. The ranger asked if we knew how the deer had been killed. We hadn't even thought about that. We assumed it had been shot, but because of the blanket, we hadn't seen any wound, and we weren't exactly inspecting it closely. We have since shortened our backcountry hikes to a maximum of 4 days. We've also been a lot less eager to call out to other campsites, and we have never approached another unmanned tent again. Story 2. This happened during the height of COVID, when the whole world felt like it had shut down, and the only thing anyone could really do was go outside. I was in my 20s at the time, working from home like everybody else, and most days I barely left the apartment. One evening after work, I just needed some air. There was a trail not far from where I lived that ran alongside a side road and a highway. Nothing remote or dramatic, just a simple walking path. The kind of place you go when you want to feel like you did something without committing to a whole event. I figured I'd park, walk for a bit, clear my head, and come back. The parking lot for that section of trail was tiny. 3 spots, that's it. When I pulled in, a black Suburban was already sitting there in the middle spot. I pulled into the spot on the right side of it and just kind of sat in my car for a few minutes, doing what I always do when I'm procrastinating. Texting, scrolling Reddit, not actually doing the thing I came to do. Then the driver's door of the Suburban opened. A man got out. I'd put him in his mid-30s. He walked around to the front of his car and lifted the hood. Then he walked back to his trunk, then back to the hood. He did this several times, like he was looking for something specific and couldn't find it. And every single time he made that trip between the front and the back of his car, he passed through the narrow gap between his vehicle and mine, right past my window. Each time he passed, I could feel him looking in at me. Not a glance, actually looking. I kept my eyes on my phone and didn't acknowledge him, but I was aware of it every single time. I decided I wasn't getting out of my car until he left. That felt reasonable. I sat there for about 15 more minutes while he kept doing the same loop. Hood, trunk, passing my window, repeat. He wasn't flagging me down or knocking on my glass or doing anything I could point to as obviously threatening. But something about the repetition of it, the way he kept passing right by me, made me want to stay exactly where I was. Here's where I need to be honest about where my head was at the time. I was going through something personally, and I'd gotten into this mindset of refusing to let fear or discomfort stop me from doing normal things. I didn't want to be the person who sits in a parking lot too scared to go for a walk because a man was nearby. I also genuinely tried to talk myself into believing I was overthinking it, that this was probably just some normal guy with car trouble, and I was being paranoid. So I got out. I walked over and asked if he was having trouble with his car. My logic was that talking to him would help me get a read on whether it was actually safe to go walk alone on a trail he had just watched me drive up to. Looking back, I understand that was mistake number 1. His car had some kind of government tags on it. I noticed them and asked about it. He gave me a long explanation that I honestly can't recall now. The tags did make me feel slightly more at ease, which I know sounds naive, but that's the truth of what happened. Then he asked if he could have a hug, and I said yes. I know how that reads. I knew how it read even at the time, but COVID had been going on for months, and I was so isolated. There was something about the way he asked, and something about how disconnected from other people I'd been feeling, that made me think maybe he was just another lonely person who missed human contact. I told myself we both understood that feeling. I said, sure. That was mistake number 2. It was October. We were both wearing coats. Mine was long, down past my calves, and it was unzipped. When he moved in to hug me, his arms went inside my jacket instead of around the outside of it. I registered that as strange right away, but before I could process it, his hands moved down from my waist to my body, grabbing at me. I pulled back immediately. I said, that was weird, I'm going on my walk now, and I started moving toward the trailhead. I was panicked, but I was also very deliberately trying not to show it, because some part of my brain was telling me that if I freaked out or ran, I might make him act faster. He was visibly unhappy when I pulled away. He asked if I wanted to hang out later, and suggested we add each other on Snapchat. I didn't want to set him off, so I let him send me a request. Mistake number 3. Then I said something like, okay, going for my walk now, bye, and I started walking fast down the trail. What I should have done was get back in my car and leave. That was mistake number 4, and I knew it about 30 seconds after I rounded the first bend and was out of sight of the parking lot. Because now I had no idea where he was. I was alone on a trail in the woods with no visual on this man, and my car was behind me. I started moving faster, and then I heard him, running, coming up the trail behind me, fast, like he was trying to catch up. I left the trail completely and pushed through a dense tangle of bushes off to the side and dropped down low so I was hidden. My heart was going so fast. I stayed completely still. He ran past on the trail, looking around. I don't think he saw me. I stayed crouched in those bushes and worked my way through the tree line toward the edge of the parking lot, staying off the trail and out of sight the whole time. I found a thick cluster of bushes near the lot, and I got into them and waited. A few minutes later, the man came back, got in his Suburban, and pulled out. But he didn't leave. He turned onto the side road that ran parallel to the trail and started driving it slowly, back and forth. He turned around and came back down it. Then again, probably 3 passes total, moving slowly, looking out toward the trail at the spots where I would have been if I'd just kept walking at a normal pace since I'd started. He was calculating where I'd be. He was looking for me. I watched this from the bushes for about 5 minutes and didn't move. Finally, he pulled onto the highway and sped off, going the opposite direction from the town he'd mentioned living in when we were talking. The second I couldn't see his car anymore, I ran to my car, got in, locked the doors, and drove home. The whole drive, I just felt completely numb. I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't call anyone. I just drove. I've only told one other person about this until now. For a long time, I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad, that nothing actually happened, that I was fine. I think that was just my way of not dealing with it, because when I actually let myself think about the part where he came running down that trail and then drove back and forth on that road looking for me, I can admit that was terrifying. And I got lucky. Please learn from the mistakes I made. Stay safe out there. Story 3. This happened a while back when I was going through a rough patch and just needed to get out of my head for a bit. I'd been feeling cooped up, stressed, and I remember waking up that morning and just deciding I was going to do something different. Get out, get some air. So I grabbed my keys and drove out to the largest forest in my county, which is a pretty vast stretch of woodland about 40 minutes from where I live. I stopped in at the local forestry office before heading in, just to ask if there was a good spot for a short walk somewhere off the main trails. I didn't want the usual tourist path where you pass 10 other people every 5 minutes. The guy behind the desk was friendly enough and pointed me down the road a bit to a quieter area. He described it as picturesque, and honestly, that was good enough for me. I had no phone signal out there, which in the UK is not exactly unusual once you get into the deeper countryside. But the sky was actually doing something rare that day. We had real patches of blue up there, proper sunlight cutting through the canopy, and I remember thinking it already felt worth the drive before I'd even gone 50 meters down the path. As I walked further along, I noticed a clearing off to my right, where the trees thinned out a little. Since the whole point of coming out here was to actually connect with the place, rather than just walk a tarmac path and go home, I left the main trail and pushed through into the trees. It was genuinely nice in there, quiet in the way that the city never is. I could hear birds moving around overhead, swooping between branches, and the ground was soft underfoot, with all the old leaves and moss. I even found a decent spot to sit for a few minutes and just breathe. Got about 5 minutes of meditation in before I was pulled out of it by a noise somewhere off to my left. It was a scraping, aggressive kind of sound, like two animals going at each other. I figured it was foxes. They can make a racket, and I didn't think much of it. I just stood up and kept moving. After a while, I came through the other side of that section of trees and found myself on a sand road I hadn't expected. It was narrow, quiet, nothing remarkable about it. I figured I'd walk along it for a bit and find a way into the forest on the other side. And that's when I noticed the bra hanging from a bush near the edge of the road. Now look, I know people go into forests for all kinds of reasons. I'm not naive, but seeing that just sitting there on the side of an otherwise empty road did put me on edge a little. It was an odd thing to clock and then just ignore, so I filed it away in the back of my mind and kept scanning around. That's when I heard the car, or rather, I almost didn't hear it, because it was electric, and by the time it registered, it was already less than 300 yards away, coming up the road. My gut immediately said get off the road or at least step back, but there wasn't enough time to do either without making it look strange. So I just gave the driver a polite nod as he went past. Normal enough, he acknowledged it. Car goes by. Then he parks up behind me, just around a slight bend, out of direct sight. I didn't think too much of it at first. Maybe he was just stopping to check his phone or something. I started heading off the road and back toward the tree line, thinking I'd explore a bit more on that side. But then I caught the car in my peripheral vision, doing a full 180 turn before parking again. Something about that bothered me. You don't turn around like that for no reason. So I stopped, thought about it for a second, and decided to turn back the way I came instead of continuing further. As I got back onto the road, I spotted him. A man in a white shirt, standing near the bush where the bra had been hanging, moving in the exact direction I had just decided not to go. I crossed the road and went back into the section of forest I'd originally come through. After a few steps in, I turned around to check if he'd carried on in the opposite direction. He hadn't. He had crossed the road too and was walking into the same part of the woods I'd just entered. There was no way that was a coincidence. He had watched which way I went and followed. I kept my pace brisk, but I didn't run. I've got bad knees and weak ankles, and I knew if I rushed and twisted something, I'd be in real trouble out there. I still had to get all the way back to my car and drive out on a narrow country road, so I moved as fast as I could manage without risking a fall. I kept glancing back, and he was always there. Not rushing, not calling out, just walking behind me through the trees at a consistent distance. I remember feeling genuinely angry at myself for being out there, cursing the fact that I'd wandered off the main path in the first place. Eventually, I reached the far edge of that section of forest where it opened out onto a stretch of grass and shrubbery before the main path. I looked back one more time, and I couldn't see him. I actually stopped there longer than I should have. I stood scanning the tree line and listening for footsteps or movement. Nothing. No sound, no shape between the trees. Just stillness. I stepped out onto the path and felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. I started thinking maybe I'd read the whole thing wrong. Maybe it was just some guy out for a walk who happened to go the same direction. I was almost ready to chalk it up to paranoia. And then he stepped out of the tree line, not from where I'd last seen him, but from a completely different section, further along. He'd moved through the trees at a different angle while I was watching the spot he'd been before. He just stood there and stared at me. Didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. I turned and walked straight back to my car. Didn't stop, didn't look back more than once. I drove out of there and went directly to the forestry office and told them what happened. They listened. They were sympathetic, but there wasn't a lot they could actually do about it. The thing that I kept turning over in my head afterward was where he came out from. When I was standing at the edge of that tree line and couldn't see him, I was watching one direction. He had used that time to circle around through a part of the woods I wasn't watching at all. He was still coming toward me the whole time. I just couldn't see it. If I hadn't turned back when I did, if I'd kept going further into the forest, instead of trusting that feeling that told me to change course, the only way out would have been back through him, and there was nobody else out there. No signal, no other walkers, nothing. I don't know what he wanted, and I'm glad I never found out.